Somewhere in your company's HR portal, there is a checkbox that would legally hand you free money, and you have probably never clicked it. My name is Nick, and if you work at a public company, there is a decent chance your employer runs something called an ESPP, and most of the people eligible for one either ignore it completely or sign up and quietly leave most of the value on the table. My friend Marisol works at a mid-sized software company. She enrolled in her company's plan 2 years ago at the default 1%. Her coworker Theo enrolled the same week at the maximum his company allows. Same salary, same plan, same company. Theo made about $11,000 more than Marisol over those 2 years, and he didn't pick a stock, time a trade, or take on any extra risk to get there. He just read the enrollment form. Theo is going to show you what's actually inside that form right after the part that makes people afraid to touch it at all. Quick warning before we start. Plan rules vary by company, and the tax code around this has real teeth, so treat this as the shape of how it works, not your specific plan's fine print. I will tell you exactly what to check at the end. Let's start with what an ESPP actually is, because most people who've heard the term still can't tell you. An employee stock purchase plan lets you set aside a slice of your paycheck, usually through payroll deduction over a period of 3 to 6 months, and at the end of that period, your company uses that money to buy you shares of company stock. Nothing unusual so far. Here's the part that makes it strange. Most qualified plans buy those shares at a discount, typically 15% off the market price, not 15% someday if the stock goes up. 15% off today, guaranteed, built into the mechanics of the plan itself. Now sit with that for a second because it's a strange sentence to say out loud about anything financial. There is functionally no other place in the American economy where a company legally hands an employee a 15% instant return with essentially no market risk involved in capturing it. And it gets stranger because many plans don't just give you 15% off today's price. They give you 15% off whichever price is lower, the price on the day the period started or the price on the day it ended. That's called a look-back provision, and it means you're not betting on the stock going up at all. You're guaranteed the better of two prices, discounted, no matter which direction the stock moved. Here's what that actually looks like with real numbers because percentages are meaningless until you attach a paycheck to them. Say the stock is worth $100 on the first day of the offering period. 6 months later, it's worth $120. Without a look-back, you'd buy at a 15% discount off $120, so you'd pay $102 a share for something worth $120. That's an instant gain of about 17.5% the moment the shares land in your account. With a look-back provision, the plan lets you use the lower of the two prices, the $100 from day one, and then applies the discount to that instead. You pay $85 for a share worth $120. That's not a 15% gain. That's over 40% captured on day one before you've decided whether to keep the stock for another hour. Theo's plan has a look-back provision. Marisol's does too. Same plan. The difference between them was never the plan. It was the paperwork. So why doesn't everyone max this out? 3 reasons, and only one of them should actually stop you. First, people don't know the plan exists because enrollment usually happens once a year in a benefits email that gets buried between the dental plan and the parking policy. Second, people who do know about it assume it's the same as buying company stock on their own, so they treat it with the same caution they'd apply to any single stock, which misses the part where the discount is locked in regardless of what the stock does afterward. And third, this is the one that actually matters. People worry about concentration risk, holding too much of their net worth in the company that also pays their salary, and that worry is legitimate. We'll get to it. But it explains why you might not hold the shares forever. It doesn't explain why you'd skip the discount in the first place. There's a government-imposed ceiling here worth knowing because it caps how much of this you can capture in a given year. The IRS limits qualified ESPP purchases to $25,000 of stock, valued at the undiscounted price per calendar year. Most companies also cap your contribution at somewhere between 10 and 20% of your paycheck. So this isn't a strategy that turns a modest salary into an unlimited money printer. It's a bounded specific benefit, and the bound is generous enough that almost nobody hits it. If Marisol had contributed the maximum her plan allowed instead of the default 1%, the discount alone before any stock appreciation would have been worth roughly $2,000 a year on her salary. 2 years of that gap is most of what separated her from Theo. Now here's where I have to be honest with you because a video about ESPPs that skips this part is just a recruiting pitch dressed up as advice. The discount is not the same thing as free money with zero consequences, and the way you handle what happens after the purchase determines whether this benefit stays a benefit or turns into a mistake. First mistake, taxes. The discount itself is treated as ordinary income, taxed the same as your salary, regardless of when you sell. Any further gain beyond the discount depends on how long you hold the shares. Sell too early, generally within a year of purchase or 2 years from the start of the offering period, and it's called a disqualifying disposition, which pushes more of your gain into the higher ordinary income bracket instead of the lower long-term capital gains rate. Hold long enough to qualify, and a larger portion gets taxed at the friendlier rate. This is not a reason to avoid the plan. It's a reason to actually read the one page of your plan document that explains the holding period, because the difference between selling on day one and selling a year later can be a meaningfully different tax bill on the exact same shares. Second mistake, and this is the one that actually costs people real money. Holding the shares forever because it feels disloyal to sell, or because the discount made you emotionally attached to the stock, or because you're worried about the tax hit on selling more than you're worried about the risk of holding. This is where concentration risk stops being theoretical. Your paycheck already depends on your company. Your health insurance depends on your company. If a meaningful chunk of your investments also depends on your company, then one bad quarter, one layoff, one industry downturn doesn't just cost you income, it costs you your savings at the exact same moment it costs you your job. That's not a hypothetical. That's the specific pattern behind some of the more painful stories from companies that looked unshakable right up until they weren't. The boring, unglamorous answer, and by now you can probably guess I like the boring answer, is to capture the discount, hold just long enough to get the better tax treatment if that timeline works for your situation, and then sell and move the money into something diversified. You're not trying to become a long-term shareholder of your own employer. You're trying to collect a discount your company is contractually offering you, convert it to cash, and put that cash somewhere it isn't tied to your next performance review. Let's go back to Marisol and Theo because the actual math is worth seeing in full. Marisol's plan allowed contributions up to 15% of pay. She contributed 1%, mostly because that was the pre-filled default when she clicked through onboarding 4 years ago and never revisited it. Theo contributed the full 15% from week 1. Same 15% discount, same look-back provision, same company, same stock. Over 2 years, Theo's contributions captured the discount on roughly 15 times the amount of stock Marisol's did, purely because of one number on a form. He didn't predict the stock price. He didn't time anything. He filled out the same form Marisol filled out, just with a different number in one box. Here's the checklist, because this is the part I actually want you to act on tonight, not just nod along to. Check whether your company offers a qualified ESPP at all, since not every company does, and private companies typically don't. Check your contribution percentage against the plan maximum, because the default your company auto-enrolled you at is very often not the maximum, the same way Marisol's wasn't. Check whether your plan has a look-back provision, because that single clause is the difference between a 15% discount and a 40% one in a rising stock. Check the holding period requirements before you sell so you know whether you're looking at a disqualifying or qualifying disposition and what that does to your tax bill, and decide, before the shares even land in your account, what you're going to do with them, because deciding in advance is the only way to avoid deciding emotionally the day the stock either spikes or drops. Let me widen the lens for a second, because this isn't just a Marisol and Theo problem. Plan administrators who run these programs across large employers have noted for years that participation sits well below what eligibility would suggest, often somewhere in the range of a third to half of eligible employees enrolling at all, and among those who do enroll, a large share sit at low, forgettable contribution percentages rather than anywhere near the cap. That's not a story about a handful of unlucky people. That's a story about a benefit quietly underused across an entire category of jobs, the same way a bad savings rate was never really about one person's habits. It's structural. Nobody sends you a letter that says your contribution is set absurdly low and here's what fixing it is worth. That letter doesn't exist here either. It's on you to go look, the same as it always is. There's also a version of this that trips people up in the opposite direction, and it's worth naming so you don't overcorrect. Maxing out your ESPP contribution means less money in your regular paycheck for those few months since it comes out before you ever see it. If contributing the full amount your plan allows would mean scrambling to cover rent or skipping a 401k match to do it, that's not a smart trade. Free money you had to go into debt to access isn't free. The order of operations still matters. Grab your full employer match first, because that's an immediate, guaranteed return with no holding period and no company-specific risk attached to it. Then look at your ESPP contribution level and push it up to whatever you can actually afford without straining your month-to-month, ideally toward the cap if your budget allows it. This is a yes and benefit, not a replace everything else benefit. One more honest note before I let you go. Not every plan is generous. Some companies offer ESPPs with no discount at all, just a convenient payroll deduction way to buy stock, which is a very different offer and not really what this video is about. Some cap contributions low enough that the whole thing is a rounding error on your paycheck, and if your company's stock is volatile enough that even a locked-in discount and a quick sale still leaves you nervous, that's a legitimate reason to participate cautiously or not at all. This isn't a plan that fits every person in every company. It's a plan that a specific sizable number of people are eligible for and simply never look at. I'm not a financial advisor, and this isn't financial advice. It's arithmetic, and you should check your own plan document, because mine is a generic example and yours has its own specific rules. If you want to go deeper on stuff like this, our school community walks through exactly how to read one of these plan documents line by line, links below. But here's what I actually want you to sit with. The gap between Marisol and Theo was never talent, risk, tolerance, or luck. It was a single number on a form neither of them thought twice about. Marisol didn't lose $11,000 by making a bad investment. She lost it by never making a decision at all, by leaving the default exactly where onboarding left it 4 years ago. Theo didn't win by being smarter about the stock market. He won by opening one document his company already handed him and reading it all the way through. So open your benefits portal tonight. Find the ESPP section if you have one. Look at what percentage you're actually contributing, and if that number is sitting at whatever it was auto-set to on your first day, ask yourself honestly whether anyone ever told you it could be higher and whether you ever asked.